Something deeply contradictory is happening between what the United States government is saying publicly and what the United States military is doing operationally. And the gap between those two realities has never been wider. On March 19, President Donald Trump told reporters he was winding down military operations in the Middle East. Within 24 hours, the USS Boxer departed San Diego carrying 2,200 United States Marines toward the Persian Gulf, 3 weeks ahead of its scheduled deployment. This was not a routine movement. This was an accelerated combat deployment, joining another 2,200 Marines already en route from Japan aboard the USS Tripoli. Combined, that represents nearly 5,000 additional amphibious assault forces flooding into a theater where the sitting president claims operations are concluding. Simultaneously, Iran's new supreme leader Mojtaba Khamenei issued his first message since taking power 11 days ago, declaring that the enemy has been defeated. The message was not delivered in person. It was read by a state television anchor over a still photograph. Mojtaba Khamenei has not been seen, has not been heard, and has not appeared in any video footage since the airstrike that killed his father, his mother, his wife, and his sister on March 1. The United States Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stated publicly on March 13 that the new Iranian leader has been wounded and likely disfigured. That assessment came from the same Defense Department, now deploying 2 full Marine expeditionary units into striking distance of Iranian territory. Subscribe to Pivot Analysis right now and turn on notifications. What is being documented here is a military escalation occurring simultaneously with official communications claiming de-escalation, and the operational reality on the ground is diverging from public statements at a rate that requires the kind of evidence-based analysis that this channel provides at every major development in this conflict. Before proceeding further, it is necessary to establish clearly what is confirmed, what remains contested, and what falls into the category of genuinely unknown information that honest analysis must acknowledge rather than paper over. What is confirmed? The 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit departed Naval Base San Diego aboard the USS Boxer on the 18th of March 2026. NBC News, Reuters, Military.com, The Hill, and ABC News all confirmed the deployment. The unit consists of at least 2,200 Marines based at Camp Pendleton. The USS Boxer is accompanied by the USS Comstock and USS Portland, amphibious landing dock ships capable of launching ground assault operations. Multiple U.S. officials speaking to Reuters stated the deployment was moved forward approximately 3 weeks ahead of schedule. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit aboard the USS Tripoli, carrying an additional 2,200 Marines, was redirected from the Pacific toward the Middle East on March 14, according to the Wall Street Journal and Stars and Stripes. Combined, these two deployments represent approximately 4,400 to 5,000 Marines and sailors being added to U.S. Central Command's area of operations. President Trump stated on March 19 that he was not putting troops anywhere, but added that if he were, he would not tell journalists. On March 20, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei released a written statement for the Persian New Year, claiming that Iran's unity had defeated the enemy. Al Jazeera confirmed the statement was read on Iranian state television. Mojtaba Khamenei has not appeared in public, has not delivered a video message, and has not been photographed since taking office on March 9. Defense Secretary Hegseth stated on March 13 that Mojtaba Khamenei has been wounded and likely disfigured. What is contested? Whether these Marine deployments are genuinely routine Indo-Pacific rotations, as Third Fleet officially characterizes them, or whether they are combat reinforcements for Middle East operations, as anonymous defense officials have indicated to multiple outlets. Whether Mojtaba Khamenei's absence from public view is a security precaution during wartime or evidence of incapacitation, as U.S. officials claim. Whether the accelerated deployment timeline represents a response to a specific operational requirement or part of a broader force posture adjustment that was already planned. What remains unknown, the specific mission parameters for these Marine units once they reach the theater. Whether U.S. planning includes amphibious operations against Iranian territory, specifically the strategic oil export hub of Karg Island, which handles approximately 90% of Iran's crude exports, according to The Guardian. Whether Mojtaba Khamenei's physical condition genuinely prevents him from appearing publicly, or whether Iranian leadership has made a calculated decision to withhold his image for strategic reasons, what operational threshold would trigger the deployment of these forces into direct ground combat rather than remaining as offshore response capability? The operational characteristics of a Marine Expeditionary Unit deserve precise examination because understanding what these forces represent clarifies why their deployment matters beyond the simple arithmetic of troop numbers. An MEU is not a garrison unit. It is not a peacekeeping force. It is a self-contained, rapid response combat organization designed for forcible entry operations. Each unit contains approximately 2,200 Marines organized into a command element, a reinforced infantry battalion, a composite aviation squadron with attack helicopters and V-22 Osprey tiltrotor aircraft, and a logistics combat element. The USS Boxer, a Wasp-class amphibious assault ship, can carry F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters with vertical takeoff and landing capability. These are not defensive assets. These are offensive power projection platforms built for one primary mission, putting Marines on hostile shores under fire. The USS Boxer left San Diego on March 18. The voyage to Southeast Asia requires approximately 2 weeks. From there, transit to the Persian Gulf adds additional time depending on operational tempo. The USS Tripoli, already operating in the Pacific when redirected, is likely to arrive in theater by late March, according to defense analysts tracking satellite imagery. That timeline matters because it establishes an operational window. If these forces are genuinely intended for combat employment rather than deterrence posturing, the capability arrives in theater within days, not weeks. What mission profile could justify accelerating these deployments by 3 weeks? Multiple defense officials speaking to Reuters and Military.com have indicated that amphibious forces provide options for scenarios including securing strategic choke points, protecting or evacuating American personnel, and conducting raids against high-value targets. The Guardian reported on March 20 that Karg Island, the critical node handling 90% of Iranian oil exports, has been discussed among U.S. officials as a potential target for occupation or blockade. Karg Island is not a heavily defended military installation. It is an industrial facility with loading terminals, storage tanks, and a small security force. A single Marine Expeditionary Unit possesses more than sufficient combat power to seize and hold that objective. The strategic logic of such an operation is straightforward. Iran's government funds its military operations, its proxy networks, and its domestic budget primarily through oil revenue. Karg Island is the physical infrastructure through which that revenue flows. Controlling or destroying that infrastructure eliminates Iran's ability to finance sustained military resistance. The economic dimension of what is happening deserves direct attention because it reaches every person watching this analysis, whether or not they care about Middle Eastern geopolitics. Oil prices surged above $120 per barrel on March 10 following confirmation of Mojtaba Khamenei's appointment, the highest levels since 2022, according to CNBC. The Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 20% of global oil supply transits, remains partially closed due to Iranian mining operations and attacks on commercial shipping. Gasoline prices in the United States have reached levels not seen since the COVID-19 pandemic, according to Military.com. The International Energy Agency announced on March 12 the largest strategic petroleum reserve release in its history, 400 million barrels. To stabilize supply after the war triggered what IEA Executive Director Fatih Birol described as one of the biggest oil disruptions on record. The agency estimates global supply could fall by 8 million barrels per day in March. If you drive a car, if you heat your home, if you work in aviation, manufacturing, logistics, or agriculture, this conflict is already in your costs. That is not a future projection. That is current economic reality. Set against that backdrop, examine the Iranian leadership's messaging. Mojtaba Khamenei, 56 years old, assumed power on March 9 after his father Ali Khamenei was killed alongside his mother, wife, and sister in a joint U.S.-Israeli airstrike on March 1. The younger Khamenei is a hardline figure with deep connections to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, sanctioned by the United States in 2019 during Trump's first term. President Trump stated on March 12 that Mojtaba Khamenei's selection was unacceptable and that he wanted to be involved in choosing Iran's next leader, an extraordinary statement that effectively declares U.S. intent to determine Iranian domestic governance. Israel has publicly identified the new supreme leader as a legitimate military target. Defense Secretary Hegseth claimed on March 13 that Mojtaba Khamenei has been wounded and likely disfigured, stating, quote, "I think you know why," he issued a written statement rather than appearing in person. Iranian state media has provided no video footage, no audio recording, and no photograph of Mojtaba Khamenei since he took office. His Nowruz message on March 20, claiming that the enemy has been defeated, was read aloud by a television anchor while a still image appeared on screen. The operational pattern here requires direct acknowledgement. A leader who claims victory does not hide. A government confident in its strategic position does not issue written statements through proxies while its supreme commander remains invisible. The Iranian narrative of victory against a defeated enemy is occurring simultaneously with the United States deploying thousands of additional Marines specifically trained for amphibious assault operations into a theater where Iranian oil infrastructure represents the single most valuable and vulnerable strategic target in the entire conflict. Those two realities cannot both be true. Subscribe to Pivot Analysis and turn on notifications. When these Marine forces reach operational range of Iranian territory, when satellite imagery confirms their positioning, when the next phase of this conflict begins, the analysis will be here, connecting the operational evidence to the strategic logic rather than simply repeating official talking points from either side. Here is what to watch in the days ahead. The USS Tripoli's position can be tracked through open-source satellite imagery and ship tracking databases. When that vessel enters the Arabian Sea, it will signal that amphibious assault capability has arrived in theater. The USS Boxer's transit can be similarly monitored. If both units converge in the Persian Gulf region rather than dispersing across Central Command's area of responsibility, that concentration of force suggests a specific operational plan rather than general deterrence. Mojtaba Khamenei's next public communication, whether in person, via video, or through another written proxy statement, will reveal whether Iranian leadership believes it can continue operating without demonstrating his physical capability to govern. Oil markets will respond to any indication that these Marine forces are moving toward operational employment rather than remaining offshore. Brent crude futures, gasoline prices at the pump, and statements from the International Energy Agency regarding further reserve releases will all function as real-time indicators of how seriously financial markets are treating the threat of expanded ground operations. What U.S. officials say publicly about the mission of these deployments versus what operational movements satellite imagery reveals will show whether the gap between official narrative and operational reality is widening or narrowing. Here is the full picture of where things stand on March 21. Confirmed. Approximately 5,000 United States Marines aboard amphibious assault ships are en route to the Middle East. The deployments were accelerated by 3 weeks. President Trump claims operations are winding down. Defense officials speaking anonymously state these forces provide options for ground operations. Iran's new supreme leader issued a written statement claiming victory. He has not appeared in person since taking power. Not yet confirmed whether these Marines will be employed in combat operations or remain as offshore contingency forces. Whether Mojtaba Khamenei's condition prevents public appearances or whether this is operational security, whether U.S. planning includes seizing Iranian oil infrastructure. Professional consensus among defense analysts: the deployment of 2 full MEUs ahead of schedule during a conflict represents operational preparation, not routine activity. The concentration of amphibious assault capability in a theater where strategic infrastructure is vulnerable and undefended suggests mission sets beyond deterrence. Subscribe to Pivot Analysis and turn on notifications. Evidence first, analysis second, always. Leave one question in the comments. Do you believe the United States is preparing for ground operations against Iranian territory, or is this force deployment purely for contingency planning and deterrence?